Behind the net, centers, flat, tries to Clark, shot, oh, rebound, score! Scored for the game winner at 12 minutes and 1 second of Sunday.
TheFourthPeriod.com presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 74. I'm your host, Isaiah.
I'm Dan the Flyer fan.
I'm Chef B.
All right, gents, we're back. Going to have Russ Cohen on directly. And, wow, the last 24 to 48 hours, we've had some news. We have a playoff proposal that Gary Bettman talked about on the various NHL feeds. And then, of course, yesterday they had a return to sport proposal, some 22-page document, and Dan's going to sum that up a little bit. The nuts and bolts of how they're going to do this. There's a lot of breaking news, and it's really going to be great to have Russ on momentarily just to kind of break that down. But I just wanted to make a quick housekeeping announcement. We're going to be on SoundCloud for this episode and maybe one or two others. But after that, we won't be on that podcast platform anymore. Just to let you know, we are on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and of course the O&B Puckcast YouTube channel. And you could also, if you're at thefourthperiod.com, reading fine articles by Dennis Bernstein and, of course, David Pagnotta from thefourthperiod.com. We're at the bottom of the page. You link us right to our podcast there as well. So we think 7 podcast platforms is enough. And, well, so just before Russ comes on, Dan, just some initial impressions before we dive deep in with some of the news that's come out over the last, say, 24 to 48 hours.
Well, I kind of skimmed over most of the 22 pages, and you got to give it to the NHL. They're certainly covering their bases here in terms of the most precaution that they can bring. But at the same time, anybody that's watched hockey for even 5 minutes knows that a lot of this stuff is going to be very difficult to adjust to. No spitting, no scrums after the break. Everybody has to have their own water bottle and towel, and you can't share any of that stuff, and masks. It's they're covering their bases well, but I wonder how it's going to play out when it actually comes to it. Now, obviously, the situation is very fluid. We had the Gary Bettman, whatever you want to call it today, where, he said that, the season at best is early July, which is still, a month and a half away. But I don't know. I appreciate what they're doing covering their bases, but it's such a double-edged sword where there's so much happening. So many ideas that I don't know what the game's going to be like. I don't know how long these players are going to follow the rules, and I don't think they're necessarily going to intentionally go out there and break them, but it's such you're changing the absolute basics of the sport here that I don't know what it's going to look like when it starts back. So there's a lot of good stuff in that in the 22-page referendum there, but at the end of the day, the feasibility of it happening seems rather strange.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that the players are going to turn into the NHL version of Fraser and Niles Crane on the bench, all fastidious there, attending to every one of their body fluids and making sure they don't spread them. Real fast, Chef, some engagement on your part before we bring Russ on.
Well, there's a lot of things like he said. I think they're going to be, when they were talking about it, all best intentions are to be like not following the rules and not trying to fall into old habits. But, what's the first thing when you say that happens when somebody says you can't do anything? Don't touch your face. What do? You touch your face. You can't help it because it's in your freaking mind already. And, when they say, I think it's phase 2, it's paragraph K, the first heading, wash hands frequently with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. How often are they going to do that during a game? How often are they going to probably just hand sanitizer? It says it's going to be on the bench, but it's the equivalent of happy birthday twice. My only question is this: whose name do you say when you're doing it? When you're singing happy birthday twice, do you say your own name or somebody else, somebody very close to you? I think that could be quite funny. Yeah,
that could be a meme. You never know. That could be on Twitter or what have you.
Happy birthday, Gary Bettman.
Okay. You don't want the guys spitting up in the middle of their ritual. So, I got to be honest. I think Bettman's done a pretty good job through this entire ordeal. And
I actually like it. I mean, look, all things realistic. You were never the only thing that you were ever going to make people happy with, and you weren't even going to make all the people happy, even if they continue the season. There would still be people going, well, you stopped the flow. Teams were hot and teams weren't hot. Even if they picked up right where they left off and finished the entire season and gave other teams a chance, whatever, somebody to go on a run, it still would have been like, oh, well, there would have been like complaints either way. So I think your most important thing is to get as much revenue that is responsible at this point for the teams to come back and salvage what they can of this season and give the players hope, because a lot of them, we're talking like nice big pay cuts for everybody, and also too, the salary cap for next year getting all messed up. So, it's a win if hockey comes back. It's a total win.
That's what I think. There's a lot of naysayers out there saying the integrity is just not going to be there, and there should be an asterisk next to the Stanley Cup winner's name. But, did they have an asterisk in 95 when the Devils won after playing, 48 games? Was that the deal? But, yeah, so I think they're doing the best they can in an unprecedented situation. We haven't had a pandemic response like this since 1918. And even though the virus seems to be actually more like 1968, with the Hong Kong flu. So before we tackle this any further, let's get Russ on and see what he has to say from Sportsology. Russ Cohen, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
All right. Yeah, you're on with Dan and Chef as well. So, Russ, right out of the gate, I got to tell you, I think I share your disappointment that the draft in June is not going to happen, apparently.
Yeah, I wish it was then, because I get the other difficulties that they explained during the call, but as an example, some players that would normally at least be at the draft, now we know it's going to be some sort of digital draft. There won't be people or anything, most likely. They might be playing. Like, they may have to, do like a quick interview or quick, hey, this was great getting selected, but they may not be able to have like a draft party because they may be playing that day if they play over in Europe or something like that. So, there's that issue. And then, the other issue is there's a lot of contracts that expire team-wise June 30th, scouts and otherwise. And so now if a scout did a lot of the work and, let's say they get let go and join another team, they sort of won't get to see it through, right? Because they won't really start working again until all the leagues start up again. So, those kinds of things leave me wanting it for June, but I get why it's not.
Yeah, well, I think they've discussed pushback from the league executives versus what Bettman definitely seemed to be on board. One, I guess, some continuity. But there was discussion about these contracts being extended under these circumstances. Has there been any further discussion along those lines?
No, because I don't think they're going to do it, because they'd have to basically extend it 2 months, maybe 3. And why would you want to extend a contract if you were going to make a change? You probably wouldn't want to. So I don't see that happening.
Right. So, look, we'll do a quick overview of the draft, but I wanted to get your thoughts on some of the things that have come out over the last 24 to 48 hours, specifically tonight with Gary Bettman out. What's that?
It's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. But the 24-team playoff is the proposal. If they get into this phase 4, they just came out with the phase 2 proposal. We'll touch on that briefly. That's like a legal brief. But so it's going to be some interesting playoff matchups. But the way it works is I guess the top 12 teams, according to winning percentage when play stopped, right?
Yeah.
And the top 4 teams in each conference have a bye, and they're going to be playing each other. And are those games going to count for seeding or no?
For seeding, yes. For statistics, like regular season statistics, no. So, like, basically, all the regular season statistics have been decided. So, like, Ovechkin and Pasternak are the Richard Trophy winners, as an example. Yeah.
Right. So there's some interesting matchups. We could maybe touch on a couple of them, but before we do that, just your overall impression of what you heard today and what was proposed even a couple of days ago with the same thing.
Well, a couple things. So nothing was going to be perfect. We know that. You would rather not have the Blackhawks and Canadians in there because they weren't going to make the playoffs. We know they weren't. But they wanted even sides, East and West, all of that. Okay. So I'll move past that. Beyond that, I had said a while ago on a few different shows, I felt like the one league that got decisive enough to have a plan unfold would probably get most of the positive press and get all the good PR. And right now they are. Like, they're probably on CNN as we speak. After that, they're getting a lot of it because MLB is bungling their situation, and somehow, and again, it seemed like the NBA a week ago was ahead of the NHL, where the NHL was ahead of them a month ago, and then they seemed to slow down, maybe because the whole Disney thing. So right now, that's, the NHL is now turned into the decisive league, and I know people like to make fun and poke fun that they aren't generally that, but they came with a lot of answers to a lot of more difficult questions than just playoff seeding. But, end of the day, I think the biggest decision they have to make about it, which they haven't made, is are teams going to reseed or are they going to do it as a bracket? We still don't know that. And so, and I'm not a fan of reseeding, but these are weird circumstances. I still think the bracket's better. Maybe because hey, if I win, I'm going to play one of those two teams, where the other way, you really don't know. And I feel like there's got to be some sort of edge for a top team because, for as much complaining as the Carolina Hurricanes did, the Bruins, they're getting jobbed here because it's possible they won't even have the top seeding, even though if this season had ended the way it normally would end, they would, right?
Yeah.
So, and they're not complaining at all. So, there's a little bit of that going on. I did have to chuckle online because I won't say who, but a member of the media who's from Philadelphia posted that, hey, if the Flyers win all their play-ins, they'll be number 1 seed in the conference. And I'm thinking, yeah, look at the list. You could be the most positive Flyers fan there is, and there's no way you're thinking they're winning 3 of those in a row.
No.
I mean, let's be realistic, guy. You know what I mean? Like, be happy. Your team's in the playoffs. But, don't talk yourself into them beating Tampa and Boston and Washington.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of creative stuff from the quarters that I think you're referring to. But, there have been there's only going to be 2 cities, right?
Yeah, there's only going to be 2 hub cities, but now it seems like there's a choice of 10. Where before I thought maybe there was a choice of 4 or 5.
Yeah,
so,
let me read those out. Chicago, Columbus, Dallas, Edmonton, Vegas, which I think's got to be one of them.
Yeah.
L.A., Minneapolis, St. Paul, Pittsburgh, Toronto, and Vancouver. And I heard Bettman say tonight that it doesn't necessarily have to be two East Coast cities. It could be the two best cities with regards to, medical concerns and all other things wrapped into it.
Right. So I think the two best cities are Minnesota, the Minneapolis, and Vegas. I think those are the two best, and I'll tell you why. And I've been to both. The Vegas one's interesting because let's say you're going to be playing 3 games a day. You still need a place to practice. And my degree, my college degree is in hotel restaurant management, and I was in that field for 10 years. So when all this came up, I started thinking like a hotel person first and a media / reporter second. And with Vegas, it looks like things are going to open up June 1st, right? So you don't want to put the guys on the main strip, because if you do that, then they're with the general population. You don't want that. But there's plenty of hotels still on the old side of Vegas. I know because I'm cheap and I stay there. That can do it. And I remember I stayed in New Orleans once, and they have the capacity for a full rink. They haven't used it in many years. The Wranglers used to use it in the ECHL, but they use it for like roller derby, but they have a whole complex in there, like entertainment complex, everything. Like if guys were stuck there, they wouldn't be that stuck. There's a lot of things to do. And so that you could use that rink as the practice rink, and that would make sense. And then guys, you'd literally just have to taxi them over to the big rink when they're ready to play, because every place is going to need a practice rink.
Right.
So Minneapolis is great because there's so many hotels there because of Mall of America and everything else. They're loaded more than they're going to get for summertime tourism, right? Especially this year. So there's plenty of options. And that building is one of the best buildings I've ever been in, the XL Energy Center.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. And so to me, I would do it both in the West. Now, the only complication is if Minnesota or Vegas were to actually advance to the Stanley Cup, they would get an actual home ice advantage. I don't know what you would do in that situation. I guess you just have to suck it up. But other than that, I think those are the two best. I think the next best one, if I was going to have to go east-west, would be Pittsburgh, because that building is unbelievable, and they've got the massive practice facility. That's where they hold so many youth events, and I've been there for like the USHL's kickoff classic every year.
Okay.
So that's another one where it's literally a 10-minute bus ride, maybe 20 minutes, and depending on the bridges, those bridges are annoying in Pittsburgh, but that's it. Again, great place to practice, great facility. The Penguins practice there. And when the Penguins are practicing, the USHL still having a game on while they're doing it. So they had 2 fully functioning ones at the same time. So you can practice social distancing if they have huge rosters, it works. And so, I look at it and I say, those are 2 or 3 of the better ones. I know everybody's going to think their city is better for whatever reason, but like Chicago, that's kind of a pain in the neck. Many of us have probably been there at this point. It's a great rink, but to get there, it's like,
But the thing, Russ, to get there and all that, I'm thinking about also population density. I don't want a bunch of population density.
No.
And if it's going to be, let it be in a place that's steaming hot, because you're going to have all the teams are going to be in one of these 2 locations.
Right.
People forget that.
I know. I don't know. It's not really proven yet about the steaming hot thing. I think none of us really know for sure, so I can't tell you definitively one way or the other.
Well, the CDC guy said that, yeah.
Yeah. But even he doesn't, I don't think even he knows definitively. I think he thinks that too, based on some early stuff. But either way, there is a negative to the steaming hot, and that is the humidity with the ice. But the good thing about Vegas is there's no humidity. So they didn't have any ice problems during the Stanley Cup, where actually Washington did. because there's a lot of humidity there in DC. So, and Minnesota, there's no humidity either. So you have to think like a weatherman a little bit with this one because, again, they've never played in August.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a challenge. It's going to be weird, but this whole year is weird. So, I mean, just
stuff that I did this season feels like a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you know, the last time I went to games, I went to that last Flyers game against the Bruins where we were practicing social distancing from the interviewers, the teams were, and it was kind of weird because we were sort of bunched together, but they were far away from us. So if there was a sick reporter, I probably could have still caught something, but they weren't going to catch anything from us, right?
Right.
But the Flyers still let us, and that was for the Bruins. The Flyers still let us in their locker room, and it was just more spread out. And I remember taking a picture. I took 2 pictures, one of Carter Hart and one of somebody else. And I did that to sort of mark time because I knew that this was going to be the last time I'd be in an NHL locker room. And I wanted to see, like, when would be the next time I would be in one. And I don't have an answer for you on that one, right? So that one's going to be out there for a while. But, yeah, I mean, it just feels like it's been forever. Like, even I went to spring training for baseball for the first time ever, and that seems like a year ago. And that was not that long ago, but we've all been through so much mentally with everything that's going on in the world that it really warps things. Like, I don't know how I'm going to even remember things years from now, from this year, because it is just such an oddity. So, yeah, I mean, nothing's going to be normal. And actually, I still think there's a great chance that what happens this year affects how the next season starts and maybe every other season after that. Because, you know, the NHL now has, like Gary Bettman talked about, does have an opportunity to sort of change the way they do the scheduling if for some reason they think this is favorable in some way. Not playing into August, obviously, but maybe starting in November.
Right. I heard him say that. And you know, you look at the timeline, Russ, and I was reading Bob McKenzie. He said the timeline's crazy because the training camps can't open until like the first half of July, and a lot of it has to do with the international travel and the quarantine that's required for the players coming over from, you know, abroad. Then training camp is 3 weeks. No playing games until late July, and no playoff games until August. And that's a best case scenario.
Well, no, actually, best case scenario would be playing games mid-July. He did say he would leave it up to the players if they feel like they're in camp. And let's say they are in camp at the time you said, and they're in shape in like 2 weeks, then they're going to speed up the schedule.
Okay.
And so that could change things. The other thing, besides the quarantining, and this sort of made sense, although, look, they know that players have gotten some advantage anyhow, like Ivan Provorov, his billet family, owning a rink, and players in Sweden and that still were allowed to skate now when things open back up. But they wanted all the teams to report at the same time because otherwise, like Florida could report today, right? If they wanted to, because their state's open, but Philly wouldn't be able to.
Exactly. You don't want that much of a competitive advantage.
Right.
Even though there are some isolated incidents.
Yes.
So in other words, Team Sweden could probably win the Stanley Cup this year, is what you're saying.
Maybe, but, you know, the interesting thing is, I think, and this is something that I brought up when I was growing up, and I know you guys aren't that much younger than me, so you'll probably remember, even going to the Warren Moon era, those players used to have gyms and hockey rinks and everything on their properties. But then everybody stopped that within the last 10, 15 years because they all like to go to these fancy workout places where they get one-on-one instruction, and they don't do that. I betcha players are going to go back to opening up their own rinks, or at least having the synthetic ice and other ways of working out, gyms in their houses, because, you know, back in the day, every superstar had that, and then they stopped. And now we saw like these goofy things where guys were like rollerblading or lifting their kids because they just didn't have the equipment they thought they would ever need at their house. So I think that's going to change too. So
we're going to have a whole feature story on obese kids because NHL players want to fatten their kids up so they can get stronger. I hear you. Now I'm only kidding. But
I know.
so I'm looking at some of these proposed playoff matchups, and I'm looking. Well, I'm thinking of you because you're a New York guy, and didn't the Rangers sweep the Hurricanes this year, and they have to play them in this 6 versus 11 matchup?
Yeah, and the Hurricanes aren't happy. They complained twice. They voted no as far as for this format, and you're going to tell me it's because of the seeding, like they said. I'm going to tell you they're lying. It's because of being swept. It's also because even though Lundqvist hasn't played a lot this year, he's like 25-5 against them since like 2011. So those are 2 bad stats for them, and they don't love their goaltending. They can't love their goaltending, right? But they have to deal with it. So those 3 things, and you look at the Rangers with the offense they have, that's become a lot tougher for them, and they feel like, without saying it this way, that they should have had like a cushier first matchup. And like years ago, I always use the example when the Rangers played the Thrashers, I picked the Rangers to sweep. I rarely pick a team to sweep, but I just knew they were going to sweep that team, right? There's no sweep here in this matchup. And so you look at it and you say, Carolina, even though they had the better record, this is a tough draw. Now, the other thing to consider is the way that parity is in this league. I mean, they finished out the season with like 3 wins before the pause. Had the season gone 3 more games, they could have lost the next 3 and been in a completely different spot.
Right.
Because things were that tight. So whatever. I just say you got to deal with it.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting. And I heard you say I think you were on with Jason on Stick to Hockey when you talked about, Shesterkin's going to get the first crack at this, but the backup goalie should definitely be Hank, and I totally agree.
Yeah, there's no way I would put Georgiev in, simply because if I'm already potentially losing, I might as well put the guy that's real familiar with this team and beating them, if nothing else, because you know what? There's always been these New York stories. You can go back to Willis Reed. Willis Reed could barely walk, and they won a championship with him limping. He actually, and it's the most amazing thing in the sense that I think he only scored 6 points against the Lakers, against Wilt Chamberlain.
I remember.
Everybody is familiar with in the Philly area, and Chamberlain was psyched out. He was completely psyched out. Like, Chamberlain should have been able to just take him to the hoop, bang him around a little on a gimpy knee, even though Willis was strong, and knocked him out of the game. And instead, it worked the opposite. And so you kind of wonder if that would happen with Lundqvist. I think it's entirely possible, because I do have this theory where I think that the veterans will come back stronger than the young players, because they're used to time off. They know how to spend with time off. They've had lockout seasons. If you're a young guy, first, second year in the league, you've not had this happen to you in any season.
Yeah.
You may never ever had a big injury where you're out for 2 months. They have.
Yeah. Yeah, just real quick with that Lakers game, the Knicks. I just remember Joey Lucas coming in, hitting like jump shot after jump shot at the top of the key, and the Lakers had no clue. I was so ticked off because I was a big Will fan. But
oh, you were. But the interesting thing about Lucas was he wasn't a great jump shooter, so that was sort of like an outlier. It should have been like Bradley or someone like that. And you said that would be like, yeah, Bill Bradley hit every jump shot, right? But the weird thing about Lucas is he used to be able to memorize the New York phone book. And to me, that was the most incredible thing Jerry Lucas ever did.
Well, he fit in with that team on that day, at least. But
he did.
Yeah, he did. But Chef, what questions do you have for Russ regarding this playoff format or matchups or what have you?
Realistically, I mean, I was looking at the way they broke everything down and how 2 weeks isolation, 2 weeks this, probably 3 to 4 weeks of training camp. Is it realistic to expect any kind of hockey before July 4th at all?
No, it's not realistic. I think the earliest would be like the 15th.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would seem to be the case.
Yeah.
Dan?
What do you think happens? They talked about the potential next season starting in January. That means the playoffs finish in, August or maybe even September. So do they just forever go back to this, or do you think they slowly work back into an October-June schedule where they, get rid of the bye weeks and stuff until they can make that happen, 3-4 years down the road?
he said he would do it in January if need be. So the need be would be if October, November, December, the CDC says you still can't have fans in buildings, but you can in January. Then they'll do it in January because then they'll have gate. If they can have gate in November, they'll wait the extra month. If they can have it in December, they'll wait the extra couple of months. I do think, though, that the opportunity with starting every November might work in this case because we know that you want to either start in November or January just in case the virus pops up again in December, like everybody who's in the know thinks it's going to happen. So if that happens, if you have to pause it for a week or so to get everything under control, it won't kill you because you probably got started a month earlier than you thought you could anyhow. So January would only be the good month because you'd be past that. And if you could have fans, well, then they're back to having gate receipts. I mean, the one thing I did laugh at with Gary Bettman was when somebody asked the questions like, well, you really need the gate receipts. And he's like, every league needs them. But it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, we know how much the NHL needs them, but he always wants to put himself on equal ground with every other league. And that's what commissioners do. But I don't think next season starts on time, though. 55 days is a short period. Like right now, it sounds like okay, but right now the world's a logistic nightmare, right? And so if everything runs to their plan and smoothly, they still have only 55 days to get ready for the next season or something close to that. So I could see all of a sudden everything ends. They look at it and say, you know what, let's give them a little more time. Mm-hmm. And that, because again, players are now going to play a more condensed schedule than they ever have before.
And you're going to have more turnover in such a short period of time. They're going to try and shoehorn a draft, free agency, and everything in such.
Oh yeah.
And it's going to work on the player's psyche. And wait a minute, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, I just think it's practical. Like, am I going to rush them back just so I can have the next season be October when it really doesn't matter if it's a month later? So if it's not June, it's like, the Stanley Cup is July 4th. Who cares? People are still going to show up. It's the Stanley Cup. It's not going to matter. Technology is what technology is. I think you do have to look at it and be fair to the players. And I think Bettman really, even though he works for the owners, I think he showed great respect to the players, something Major League Baseball can maybe learn from.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Considering the draft, what will happen between, the first round, if this doesn't happen and, it's right before the quarterfinal round, could you explain in more depth what you think will realistically happen?
Oh, you mean the draft lottery?
Yes.
Okay, so I did joke on Twitter. Sometimes I could be a jerk. You guys know me, so
Russ?
Because everybody was everybody was making fun of trying to make sense of the draft lottery, and I said, well, you should have gone to math class, guys. Kidding around, but it did take a little while to sort of figure out. And I don't know if anybody's going to know it perfectly, but the interesting thing is this. Let's just take Montreal for example. So they had a 500 record, NHL 500, and Buffalo was at 493. So they would have been picking 8th. Now they could end up picking 12th and still get bounced out of the first round. Is it worth it, or would it have been worth it for the Canadians to make the playoffs? Because now every round's picking later, right? So I just look at that one and say, ooh, that's not a great situation. Now for Ottawa, this is the best situation you could possibly ever have other than being Detroit, because having the second and third, and if you just add up the percentages, it's almost 30%. So you figure they've probably got, I would guess, around a 40% chance to get that number 2 pick. And they might have like a 12, 13% chance to get the first and second.
Well, they got San Jose's pick too, right?
Yeah, that's the number 3 pick.
Right.
And so it's got the little asterisk there. I know Sharks fans don't want to see that or hear that. But think about that. Their regular chances in the number 2 slot is 13.5, but they have a better chance than any team on the board to pick first and second.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, that's tremendous. The hope is that one of the top 4 teams, Detroit, Ottawa twice, LA, and actually any of the top 7, the hope is any of the top 7, that one of those win the top spot and maybe even the second and the third. If that happens, then it doesn't matter about all the other stuff. All the other stuff then will get decided on winning percentage as they get bumped out of the playoffs. It only gets messy with those phases if these team A, B, C, D, E, F, G, these placeholders start getting these top picks.
Right.
Then you start getting into the craziness of the phases and everything. So we have to hope that that's not going to happen. But this is the NHL, so it's probably going to happen.
Right, exactly. It's Murphy's Law, NHL style, right?
Right.
But
with their luck, it'll happen that team A, B, and C get the top 3 picks, and they're like, oh, great. Now we can't even say, like, anybody's getting Lafreniere yet because we have to wait.
Yeah.
That is a possibility. It's not mathematically a certainty, thank God, but it could be a little interesting if that were to happen.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a cluster possibility there. But, one last thing about the playoff bracket, if you will. The East matchups to me look pretty compelling for a variety of reasons. But in the West, I think we have a couple dog matchups. The Oilers in Chicago and Vancouver. Well, there's some intriguing players, but not really a great team. And Minnesota.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what. If you think about it, because Vancouver is not a super great team, I think Minnesota probably looks at that series and says, wow, not only are we in the playoffs, but this is a team we can beat. Where, who would you have said that a month ago? Like, Minnesota is going to make the playoffs, and now they actually have a chance of advancing with their new GM, with Bill Guerin there, right? Like, that's
true.
That's a favorable thing. It may not happen, but I looked at those matchups, and I think they have the best chance of having an upset. The nightmare scenario is, Connor McDavid has a so-so playoffs. His first playoffs wasn't great, like 9 points in 13 games, but he was young. So I scratched that. I don't hold it against him. But he has to sort of dominate in these playoffs. If he doesn't, and somehow Chicago wins with Corey Crawford, which we wouldn't even have thought he would have been the starting goalie, because Leonard probably would have been, but Leonard was traded because you get it. It's right. It's like a domino effect. Yeah. So and nobody knew all of this stuff was going to happen. Like, that's a nightmare scenario for Edmonton, for their fans. Like, that's like, wow. So that could be compelling if they were to drop the first game, and then it's like, uh-oh. Even though they're, even though they'll be best of 5, right? Still, you drop the first game, it's, it's not great. So that's something I think to look at. I think the tough one is, who's Calgary matching up against again?
Calgary is playing Winnipeg and Connor Hellebuck mainly.
Right, but that's a tough matchup for both. I mean, yes, we give Winnipeg the edge because they have Hellebuck, but they still don't have great defense.
No.
Calgary does have a great offense and a really solid defense. Boy, I think that's going to be a great series.
Yeah, that should be a good one.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the better ones. I think there'll be a lot of heat in that series. Pittsburgh, Montreal, I don't think Montreal is going to put up much of a fight. I think Flyers fans know this, and I don't know why players seem to always go with this, but and look, I respect the hell out of Carey Price, but he's yet to prove it to me in the playoffs. He's had like maybe 1.5 decent rounds of the playoffs, maybe 2 rounds full in his career. I mean, it was early for him when the Flyers chased him and Halak got in there.
That was a long time ago.
But still, I mean, yes, he was doing well against the Rangers, and then the Kreider thing. So people want to blame Kreider, okay, but still, we've not seen like Carey Price just be lights out in the playoffs where there was this scenario that was talked about, like, well, what if we face Carey Price and he sweeps us? It's like, it's probably not going to happen. I mean,
no, but it's in their heads. It's in their heads, though. I like it.
It is in their heads until they actually play. Remember, Montreal lost 3 times or 4 times to Detroit, one or the other. I can't remember. So that's one thing. And the other thing is they don't have a great defense.
Yeah.
And these days it's hard. I mean, on Stick to Hockey, we had Steve Valiquette on, and he agreed with me. It's very hard now to be that goalie in the playoffs that, quote unquote, stands on his head. The first Philly radio guy that says that when the playoffs start, I'm just going to laugh, because it's hard to name the last one that's actually done that, where you say, yeah, you know what? Without that goalie, there's no way they've won the cup. I mean, we remember Van Briesbroek was certainly on that kind of run. He didn't win the cup. You know, the Hamburglar was on a run for a while like that. He didn't win the cup. You know,
Tim Thomas in 11.
Tim Thomas is probably the last one. Yeah.
Or Quick. I thought Quick was just fantastic.
But he did have a really good team. Yeah, he did have a great team, though. But he was fantastic, too. So if you want to say 12 is the last time, that's fine. That's still, the league's changed since then.
It does. It changes like every 4 or 5 years, no doubt.
Yeah, so I think it's hard to do that now. So, but I think, look, there's going to be higher than normal eyeballs on these games anyhow, because sports will just be coming back. People won't be as negative about it. While we're waiting for sports to play, people are going to be negative. But the good thing for the NHL was, for as many fans online that were saying they're okay with this, they can't wait, there were the other ones that said, I hate it, I don't like it, but they're all still talking about hockey.
Yeah. Yes, they are. Just one for a point of information, Russ, a clarification there. The league has said that the semifinals and the finals will definitely be best of 7, but any round before that still could be best of 5, even after the play-in rounds.
Yeah,
that remains to be settled.
I think what they're trying to figure out is how crunched is their timeline going to be.
Exactly.
And I think they won't know that until they know when they're in camp and when they're actually going to start games. So I think that's going to be a sort of, not a real late decision, but I think that's a decision we'll hear when they're in camp.
Right. So, yeah, Dan, I wanted to, while Russ was here, I wanted to get your overview of the 20-plus page memorandum of the nuts and bolts of what the players are going to be doing, how the league is going to actually put this into implementation, whatever you want to call it. Maybe you could just touch on some bullet points, and then, Russ, maybe you could chime in on
Sure.
what you think is realistic or not.
No, they have all the safety precautions in there, things that if anybody who's watched hockey for 5 minutes can look at and go, well, this is going to be hard to break. Things like no spitting, no sharing water bottles, no sharing towels, potentially, full face coverings, no scrums after the whistles. It just seems like theoretically it's great stuff, but what is the chance that any of that comes to fruition when they play? The players probably won't go out of their way to break it or intentionally break it, but old habits die hard, right?
Right, but all right. So first one, no spitting. I think that's imperative now. I think to the point where maybe they'll even announce it's a fine if you do it too many times, because that's the worst thing you can do in this climate. So I think they're going to really try and just eliminate that, and I think they have to. And again, simply because tested or not tested, it's a bad look. So I think they're going to work on that. The irrational behavior of some fans with the face covering thing just blew me away. Like, well, if you're going to do that, don't even bother. It's not my hockey. It's like, just stop. Everybody has to be safe. Just because you got tested, what if you had a bad test? You don't know. I mean, the NHL is going to have thousands and thousands of tests. There is a chance that some of them won't be accurate. You still want to keep the players safe. So would it be horrible? I thought of this the other day. If while you're on the bench, you do have a mask on, because maybe you're not going to play with a full shield, whatever, and it's on Velcro, and the minute you go get called to the ice, you put it down, you're over the boards. It's not that hard of a thing. It's really not. But in some way, shape, or form, they're probably going to have to do that, because everybody's in close proximity on the bench. There's only so much you could stretch that out. The scrums thing is going to be hard. If you're telling me that Marchand and Wilson are going to all of a sudden start taking clean shifts, I'll laugh. So, that's, guys like Gudis, they wouldn't do that.
Especially in the playoffs after, 4 or 5 games of playing each other.
Right. So that's not going to happen. So I get that. The other thing that was sort of irrational, you didn't bring this up in this thing, but I thought I'd mention, when they said that players would be on the ice, but the coaches would have to observe.
Yeah.
They were like incensed, like, why can't the coaches be there? It's like, I don't think they understand how hockey practice works sometimes. I really don't. I mean, Claude Giroux can run his own practice. Travis Sanheim, his father's a coach, could run his own practice. But again, the guy's going to be up on, like, as an example, if it were a Voorhees, AV would be in the little balcony thing there and still yelling out things. He doesn't have to be next to him.
Yeah.
And he used to do that in football all the time.
Of course.
And the thing we've talked about on this show, and Russ, my background's in immunology. I mean, the coaches and the executives are the ones at most risk. The players, unless you're talking about Max Domi, who has diabetes, the infection fatality rate for the players is like 1 in 10,000, according to the CDC. But for the coaches and the executives, you're talking much lower.
Yeah.
That. So.
And then I forget, Dan, what were some of the other things?
Go ahead.
The towels and water bottles. Everybody gets their own towel and water bottle.
Just like in the mumps era, they did stop the water bottle thing for a while. I think that's the easiest thing to stop, to be honest. I think the trainer will be the guy that polices that. I think that's, I'm pretty sure they're going to have a trainer. Going to have to, right? Because guys are still going to get bloody and things are still going to happen. Mm-hmm. The trainer will be in charge of that. Like, I think that one's easy. And then as far as towels, again, I think they had said that every team's going to have like 100 towels a game or something.
Yeah, I saw that.
at their disposal. So I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Hey, quick thing, Russ.
Yeah.
While you're on that with the trainers, now it said that it would be 50 people, 50, I guess, staff with the team. Does that include the team, or is that in addition to the team, the actual players?
I think it's in addition to the players. Because I think when you're talking about traveling potentially from one hub to another, like that would be all you could have on a plane, like I guess if they were playing the Stanley Cup, right? Unless things changed in the world. So I think that's everybody. So I'm pretty sure the trainer will be one of them. Probably guys that won't be will be like the guys who clean out the locker room and put all the bags on the carts. They probably won't be. Players will probably be back to doing it themselves, which a lot of them do anyhow. If you notice, even some of the star players still bring out their own stuff because they don't want anybody touching it. Remember, Yager didn't want anybody touching his sticks. You couldn't even touch his sticks when he was in Philly. Like, he would tell the trainers, please, don't, just leave him alone. I'll take care of it. I don't know what he did. If he talked to him, I don't know what it was. But, so I think those people won't be there. So, yeah, I think it's not an unreasonable number.
No, I mean, it's just the limitations and how regimented, almost military-like these regulations are. With the coaches can only, the players can only be, 6 at a time in their individual workouts or something like that.
Right.
And
well, I think that came from Fauci. Like, I think they got that from Fauci. But I also think, as an example, when they're playing games, if you think an owner is not going to be in their owner's box, or a GM's not going to be up in the GM box, and that's going to count as the 50, like, stop. Because nobody's going to be near them. It won't matter.
Right.
You won't even know that they're there.
Right. Well,
they're not going to police it to that degree. You know what I mean?
No, but I mean, they do have rules for everybody, like the massage therapists, chiropractors, any kind of player performance personnel. It's they got dotted every I, crossed every T.
I don't think hockey players are going to get mad at that, but if this were the Phillies, Cole Hamels would have, because, his wife was his massage therapist, right? So that would have been causing a problem.
I think so. So the players...
I was covering the team then, and it was a problem. Trust me. But it was a problem because she was there. Like, it was just.
Yeah. It's a little.
It was one of those. It was one of those things that got talked about. Let's just say that.
Too much information.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't share supplements, gels, balm, creams, water. But we don't talk about water.
Right, like as an example. Right, as an example, Barry Bonds couldn't share the clear with Gary Sheffield.
Do they actually sell little packets of creatine that I can just tear apart and go? I mean,
now.
I swear to God, Benefiber, it's in my coffee. I swear.
Yeah. So listen, if you want to read a good article that it gets it in the nuts and bolts, check out Scott Burnside on The Athletic.
He's a great writer.
Yeah, and he put some really good stuff down on paper about Phase 2 protocols and bullet points. It's not the most thrilling thing to try and go through item by item, but you want to be knowledgeable of why things are going on. But
don't you feel like your job got harder and our jobs got harder and fans just being a fan got harder?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I hate details. I hate contracts, details, all of that stuff. But I just want to give people a baseline set of knowledge points or what have you, so they don't go into this thing blind and they're checking us out, and we want to give them information. But anything else about what the league's come down with over the last little bit here, Russ, that maybe stuck in your mind that maybe some other people haven't covered, or novel things that have come to mind for you?
No, I mean, right now, I think that most things have been covered well. I think the bracket thing is a big thing with me. And I've been trying to think about it since that call, because I was dead set against it at first. I'm pretty sure there was a year where in the NFL, like if a first seed lost to, like, I don't know, whatever it was, the 8th seed, they took over their whole home field advantage and everything else, right? Didn't that happen once?
That's a good question.
I think it did back in the old days. And so, like, with this one, it's like, I still feel like, even though you should never look ahead, like, if you are the top dog, you kind of should know who you're potentially going to face in the next round, don't you think? In this sport, this isn't college basketball. So I feel like that's something that really needs to be fleshed out, talked about, written about, with all the pros and cons that I'm never going to have all the time with now.
You mean the bracket versus the reseeding?
Yeah.
So you like the bracket?
I like the bracket because I just think right now it just seems like it's better set up for a bracket. And you could have a bracket show. I want a bracket show.
All right. Well,
I'm thinking
listen,
TV.
I'll take anything I can get right now, because we're not going to get that darn draft. But the only thing I like about a reseeding, it would seem to reward what the teams did in the regular season that got curtailed.
Okay. I mean, that's fair.
Yeah, other than that, I definitely see the point, but I'm kind of 50-50 on it. So
the one that I think will get written about is where Bettman was talking about the amount of tests, and I think he said it could be up to like 25,000, but, tests should be plentiful then. We've been hearing that for months and months and months, and tests are still not plentiful. I'm sure he's being told they will be. But is that a guarantee?
No, it's not. Yeah, I did want to mention one thing, because I used to work for Abbott. Now, Abbott did have a problem with accuracy with their test, and I know they have a saliva test. I can't imagine it's as accurate as a swab, and certainly neither as accurate as the blood test, but the blood test takes too much time. So
right, they need 24-hour turnaround.
Right,
is what they're hoping.
Exactly. So they're going to have to work that out, and hopefully Abbott has their stuff together there with that. So
because I think that's going to be a hard one. I know there's a lot of hope in that one. Let's put it that way. I think there's a lot of hope in that one. Beyond that, they never mentioned when they're staying at hotels. Again, this is me, the hotel guy. If they're in single rooms, I think you have to demand that they be in single rooms. Even though I know a lot of hockey players like to room together, yada yada. But I think for the purposes, if you have to quarantine guys, which I think it's going to be inevitable that would happen, it would be so much easier if that guy's not rooming with somebody, because then tracing it becomes easier too.
Well, it would seem to be mandatory unless they expect their families to stay home all day. Their families are going to come in contact with other people, even with mitigation and everything like that. It would seem to be a must.
Right. So that wasn't brought up. I think that that's something that's going to be one of those finer details that I probably shouldn't even bother thinking about, but I did, because that's where my mind goes. But other than that, I think for now they have it pretty much under control, other than picking the hubs. I know when Adam Silver said for his league that guys weren't going to be like quote unquote stuck in their rooms for quarantine. That scared me a little. The NHL didn't really talk about that. They just kind of said, I forget the verbiage, but they left it a little open, and that's where you kind of wonder, you don't want them to come in contact with too many people, like friends and family and whatever, because those people come in contact with a lot of other people, service workers and other people every day, shopping and all that. And then that's where you could run into, like, remember the German soccer coach? He went out to get toothpaste. He got it, and then he had to get quarantined, right?
Right.
You worry about that a little. Other than that, I'm good.
Yeah. So let's pivot. I do want to cover the draft a little bit, but just some Flyers news. Yep. Jamie Basco from Flyers Nitty Gritty, I noted he was writing out there that the Flyers have until June 1st to sign David Bernhardt or Linus Hogberg.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking Hogberg's probably the only one of those two that they might take a flyer on. What say you?
I disagree. I think Hogberg's faster, but I don't think he's got much upside beyond that. And his scoring's been really non-existent. Not that Bernhardt's great. He's probably should be higher league-wise now than where he is. But he also got a late start. Like 2 years ago when I interviewed him in camp, he told me that, there was a coach who wasn't playing him that much. And, that's not his fault. But that's what happens when you play in a league with men, right?
Right.
And so right now he's 22. He's a little bit behind it. But he's got, to me, the better makings of a third-pairing NHL defenseman than Hogberg. Hogberg's kind of like second pairing or bust for me. And I think it's more going down the bust lane. So I would want to do it with Bernhardt, but I don't think they'll do it with either, because I think they're from the previous regime. They're going to look and say they have a lot of defensemen, and they want to keep their contract situation open, because you never know what's going to happen in a year or so with some of their players, and they may have to start signing a lot of free agents or trying to get some of their younger talent over quicker, guys like Cam York, guys like that. So I think they're trying to keep that flexibility. Like even in a year, I can envision Sam Morin not being on the team, right? When his contract's up, unless he gets signed to like an AHL only deal. So I think they probably just feel like, yeah, you know what? This regime doesn't have enough invested in those guys.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm not exactly heartbroken.
Right.
The guys to watch on the blue line for the Flyers are Cam York and Igor Zamula for the most part.
Yeah.
Wiley,
Yeah, Wiley's real good too.
And Ronnie Adder, we talked about.
Yeah, and Adder's a long shot, but he's a better long shot than the other guys, because if he actually were to hit, he would be a nice package.
Yep. So. Listen, we can't spend all night on a draft that is not going to happen until, November? But
this is the longest draft season for me ever.
Oh, God. Well, we all agree that Alex Lafreniere from Rimouski is going to be the number one pick.
Yep.
Then it's a little bit of a jumble depending on who you follow. And, these players are going to change a lot in 6 months. Are they going to have... You have to wonder if they're going to have fitness testing, and at this age, they're can be like a different player in 6 months.
Well, you bring up something interesting, because for this draft, there clearly was going to be no fitness testing. For the extension now of the draft, could there actually be a combine with fitness testing?
Yeah,
maybe. So you're right. That could give some prospects some extra time to do it, but then again, some guys may be playing, so they might not be able to take part. It all depends when they're having it. Maybe they would be able to have it before their season begins. I don't think the number 2 is really up for grabs. I don't think there's going to be many teams that would want to take Stützle second. I mean, I have him sixth right now, and he's not going to move up. There's going to be other changes in my list, but he won't move up. And I think it's Byfield no matter what, because Byfield's the center. He's a big center. He's got speed. Like, I don't think any team is going to mess around with that potential and say, yeah, let's go with Stützle, because, you know, he's really – and I have an exclusive with Stützle, so I got to know him a little bit, and I'm very impressed. Like, but it's still, at the end of the day, that league doesn't face a lot of back pressure. He says he loves playing in North American rinks, but he hasn't done it a lot, just World Juniors and another tournament. So, you know, with all those things, Byfield's going to have a quicker transition, I think, to the NHL than he will. He'll still make it. But if you remember, like, you know, Seider looked like he was going to transition right away, and it took a little while. I think Seider's ready now. But I think I would go with Byfield, and I think most teams would too.
Now, Quinn Byfield has a physical package. He was 6'4", 215, might even be taller than 6'4".
Yeah.
But the one question about him is his hockey sense. What's your opinion there?
I didn't find any issue with his hockey sense. I mean, I saw him play in a fast and loose top prospects game, and then I saw him. I can't remember. See, again, it seems like last year, whether it was before or after that, in a regular season game, and he went on a streak of like 3 games where he didn't produce any points, right, when I was watching him. But I saw the other things, and I do think his hockey sense is fine. It always can be improved upon with some players. It's rare when we say, like, that guy, like Cole Perfetti's got perfect hockey sense now, but that's rare. So, and I've got Perfetti fourth. So I think I would not use that as a barometer as to say, I'm going to take Stützle over him, because honestly, that league, you don't have to think as fast. The rink is bigger. He told me that. Mm-hmm. He basically told me in North America he likes it better because the offense and the action is quicker and everything moves quicker. So there's going to be a big adjustment there.
Okay.
Not for Byfield, though.
Okay, so you have Lafreniere, then you have Byfield, and then you think number 3. It wouldn't be Stützle, it wouldn't be Cole Perfetti. Who would you have at that 3 slot?
I mean, I think there's possibly a team that would take Stützle there, but I still would go with Drysdale, because I think there's a big gap between him and every other defenseman in this draft. I mean, he's got great stick and puck control, great first pass. You know, he can walk the line when you want him to on the power play. He's smooth. He's a calm guy. He's very impactful shift to shift. Like, you notice him every shift. And one thing, when I interviewed him after a game, I was impressed with was he doesn't care if he has a target on his back. He kind of knows that when he goes out there, there's going to be extra attention paid to him, and he likes it, and he's up for the challenge. And he's also a guy a little bit different, because, you know, I ask a lot of different questions to guys because I want to get a read on them as much as anything, even content for a story, maybe because I'm going to use it, you know, on the draft show that I do with Sirius. But the one thing he impressed me with was he said he enjoys playing 5-on-5 as much as the power play. And usually defensemen of this era don't say that.
Right. Now, he's a right shot, definitely. That's another box to check off. But he's not the biggest guy. Right now he's 5'11", about 170. Does he have a frame to get, like, a little bit bigger, thicker?
Yeah, I think he'll go 180, 185, and I think that's fine. I mean, again, when we're playing more offensive hockey and the speed and the hockey sense is there, it's not going to matter. Does it matter for Quinn Hughes now?
Nope.
And he's smaller.
Right, exactly. And how does Drysdale's game, like, how does his upside? He's not going to be Quinn Hughes, but or will he be?
Well, I mean, I do think he's a top pairing guy. I think he's a top power play guy. I don't think he's Quinn Hughes, because I don't think he can break down the other team by the time he gets the puck in the zone. Quinn Hughes does that faster than anybody I'd ever seen as a young player, and you could really see how that was happening at the end of the season. I actually think with the way he was playing at speed and breaking things down, he was sort of revolutionizing the position. I think Drysdale would be a notch below that, but I still think very effective 50-point defenseman when he's got things right.
Very, very good. So why don't we just round out a top 10, and then I'll just ask you about maybe some players that'll be in the Flyers' range when they draft maybe what would be 26, and what I call the Brian Prop position there.
Yeah, they should all would be so lucky.
Right.
So I've got Perfetti 4, Alexander Holtz 5, Tim Stützle 6, Raymond 7, Rossi 8, Yaroslav Askarov, the only goalie I have in the first round, 9, Anton Lundell 10. If people go to Sportsology, I had an exclusive with him, some very interesting stuff, and also posted a second one up on Elite Prospects yesterday. So he's an interesting kid. Those are the top 10. I don't think it's going to change much for me, but I think from 11 on, a lot is still going to be decided. You're going to still see a few players in my list disappear. You're going to see a few others move in. And now that I've got more time to look at guys and evaluate and keep evaluating, I'll probably make more changes.
Yeah, and there's going to be greater intrigue with the player movement that's required as teams are jockeying to get ready for the expansion in the following season. So
yes,
it's it'll be interesting in that regard. But if you look at where, as things sit now, where the Flyers could be drafting in that 26th spot, and that, by the way, that was Brian Propst's number, but that's why I call it the Brian Propt spot. But
yeah, I don't remember where he got taken. I figured he was probably higher, but I wasn't sure.
Right.
I can't remember.
But yeah, maybe some players that would be in that range who might be Flyer targets. I think they're just going to take the best player available because they're pretty well stocked. It'd be nice if they had a sniper, a shoot first kind of guy, but at this spot in the draft, you just take the best guy that you according to your scouts.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is there'll be a lot of defensemen there because I think unless there's a run, that's how it's going to sort of break down. Jean-Luc Foudy's an interesting one because he's a center. Liam's his brother. He's a guy where you look at and say he just needs to be more consistent, but he's super fast.
Yeah.
He's already pretty strong, going to get stronger if he's anything like Liam. Does everything you want him to do, but then you sort of look at him and say, there's a little bit more that can be unlocked there. And if you're that team that feels like they can unlock him and he falls to you, you might have to take him. Because when can you get a potential like second line center if he were to really hit big, or at least third line center there? I mean, the Flyers, that's, maybe still going to be a position of need when they draft, even though he's still 3-4 years away. But, I still look at their system and say they still need a little luck center-wise. And so maybe he's a player. I think another one that could fall to him, I know fans are only going to want to hear me talk about offensive players, right? So I'm just going to give you offensive players, because if I say defense, they're going to be like, oh, we're loaded with defense, we don't need it, even though you never know who's going to be hurt or who's going to get traded
or drafted in the expansion. They might have to left unprotected. Yeah.
There's a guy, Daniil Gushkin, who played for Muskegon, a Russian, who really good player. I mean, this is a guy who's put up some good points. He's a winger. He's fast. He's got a great shot. You notice him right away. Definitely a sniper mentality. He's not going to play in juniors, so he's going to play in a professional league next year no matter what. There's still things to work on with him, but you kind of wonder, would they look at a guy like that because, they could say, hey, either go play in the KHL or, hey, go play over in Sweden or whatever, and maybe kind of guide him a little bit that way. But he told me he's going to play in a professional league. So he's not going to go to college, not going to play CHL. So that's something where that could be advantageous. You never know if Connor Zary drops to that point, because Connor Zary, I had originally like in my top 15, and then where do I have him now? 25, I think, on my latest list.
Okay.
And yeah, because I'm on version 3.0. I should have pulled up my 4.0. But he's 25, and he's a guy who's listed as a center. But I think we've learned at this point, as far as being a center in the NHL, all guys get listed as a center if they've had any capability. Even Stützle said, oh, yeah, I played center. I'm going to practice faceoffs and everything. But, and where that becomes a big thing is, hey, if you have a winger that can take faceoffs, that's good, because you need that now because of the new rule, right? one guy for the left side, one guy for the right side. So it's not always the center taking them all.
Sure.
But Zary is a guy that I think drives play, has a great shot, also could be a playmaker. But I still think he's going to be on the wing, and I think he'd be more freed up on the wing. Like what you see, and I'm not comparing guys, but I'm saying what you've seen in the older Giroux, like when he's better off the wall now rather than having to play at center scoring-wise.
Yeah. I
think you would see that out of Zary too. And so, if he were to be in that spot, if I'm right, and he's like 25, 26, that's a great value, because then you get a guy maybe with the center mentality that's a winger. Now, he is not a sniper, but he definitely could score goals. Hendrix Lapierre is another great player who plays for Chicoutimi.
Great name.
He's got the name. He's got some size. He's definitely got scoring ability, but he got injured this year. And so, this year especially was not a great year to get injured. But there's a nice package there of offense that I think if they were able to get him, that's good value. Sean Farrell's a guy who played with the NTDP for a while, then went on his own in the USHL, because some guys do that. They don't get, like when I saw him 2 years ago with the NTDP, he was on the fourth line. Now when you see him with the Chicago Steel, he's on the top line. It's a big difference, right?
Right.
And he got to play with Brendan Brisson, who's another guy who I can talk about in a minute.
Good. I was going to bring him up.
Yeah. But Farrell, I love the way he skates. He gets a lot of scoring chances. He probably could shoot a little more, but he's a smart player and really skilled passer. He's not going to be a sniper, but again, really good player. Brisson is super smart. I mean, this kid, I doubt he'll be there, but you never know. You never know how a draft's going to go. And he's fast. He's a playmaking center for sure. His skating is terrific. His hockey sense is great. I think he's got a very analytical mind. If you talk hockey with him, because of his dad, Pat Brisson, the agent, and because of guys that he gets to practice with, like Sidney Crosby and guys like that, all work out with him and stuff in the off season, he's got a nice advantage, and he's got a great one-timer. Like, that's somebody that if I were the Flyers, I would even consider moving up a few spots to get. Now, let's not be unrealistic. If the Flyers are picking 25th, they're not moving up into the top 10. This is not the Paul Holmgren era anymore. It's not happening, especially in this draft, in a really good draft. They don't have the capital, or at least, I shouldn't say it that way. They're not going to want to give up the capital that it would take to do it. I know everybody would say, well, you give them Radcliffe and a pick, and it's not enough. You're going to have to give up like Morgan Frost. And I don't think they'd want to do that, right?
No, they're in a window where they have to win now while Giroux's on the team, and now's not the time to go spending assets to move up like that for players that could really help them in the playoffs later that year.
Yeah. I'll give you another one. If for some reason he were to fall here, I like Jan Misak a lot. He's also another center, and I have him at 14, but I think I'm a little more flowery than some others. He's a Czech. I still think he's like a budding star. He makes teammates better. He definitely scores. He's definitely a scorer. He's got game speed. He's one of those guys that plays at game speed. He's got a great wrist shot. And on big ice, he's really dangerous, but he's also a guy I feel like will transition well to North America, high hockey IQ, and he's already a good two-way player. For some reason, if he gets lost in the shuffle there, that's a guy who I like.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, with Brisson, you had mentioned him. He seems like he's like primed to be like what a Flyer is now. Especially, you said he's good at zone too, and has that high Q, that hockey IQ that like this team has been built around for the last 5 years.
Yeah, he definitely does, and like the Chicago Steel run their program like a pro team. And so everybody on that team is super smart. They're used to traveling. Like, as a good example, when I was trying to interview Farrell early in the year for a website, I couldn't get him on the phone. And then I had to go to cover in the Winter Classic in Dallas. And the Steel got back to me like a few days later, and they said, oh, you should have told us. We played right after that. we had a game at the Winter Classic. Like, I had no idea. But think about that. A USHL team is at the Winter Classic, right? I mean, that's how much pull the Chicago Steel have. And so this kid is worldly already. And so, yeah, he'd be good. I'll give you another outsider, Zion Nybeck. Not a lot of talk about him. Right winger. Love him with the give and go, and he has a lot of finish around the net. I think he would be there. He plays for HV 71 right now. But that's a guy who I saw in some international play and was impressed with.
He's a little fire plug, right?
Yeah. But he doesn't get a lot of talk. He just doesn't. And there are defensemen too, but I'll be fair and lean with the fans and say, if everything's equal, they probably would take an offensive player.
Well, I mean, plus we're so far out anyway. It's more fun to talk about the forwards right now.
Yeah.
So so that's great that we got some names on the board and people can do some research listening to this. And it's a shame we're not going to get that draft, but there's built-in advantages the other way, like we mentioned.
Yes.
So but it's these are strange times, and we're working our way through it.
Yep. I mean, again, it just we're steps closer now to at least seeing the sport return, and that makes me happy.
Yep.
And just for history's sake here, Brian Propp was drafted 14th overall.
14th.
Yeah, I figured it was higher.
Right.
Yeah.
His uniform number was number 26.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's I was just going for something there, and obviously.
I mean, with the numbers that Propp put up, he's almost a Hall of Famer, but he did play in an era where offense was plentiful, and I think that works against him.
Well, you know what's good about Propp? Just the last thing about him. When you look at where he was drafted and some of the alternatives, some of the other guys they realistically could have taken, he holds up pretty well, which is amazing. Yeah. That draft was incredible because of WHA influx and all that.
Right.
So
Propp was a hell of a scorer, man.
Yeah.
He was.
He really was. Check him out at any of the reference sites. You might be very surprised.
I think people would be very surprised. I mean, we recently, like on the Hockey Buzzcast a couple of weeks ago, we had like Mike Rogers on, and he was a 100-point scorer. And for some reason, he told me when he's coming out of the WHA that Vancouver wanted to sign him, but they were like, you're not going to make our team, so you're going to have to start off in the AHL. And he's thinking, AHL? I just scored 100 points in the WHA. No, thank you. Goes to Hartford, scores 100 points. So, that's and Pierre LaRouche. You want to talk about a guy that if he just had a few more years, my God, could that guy score?
Yeah.
So, we had him on too.
No, that's terrific. Yeah, Pierre LaRouche, Pittsburgh.
Look at his goal scoring numbers. They were crazy.
Yeah. You know who would shock you more than anybody is, and a lot of people don't know this. You know the name, but until you look at the numbers, Marcel Dion.
Oh yeah.
Staggering.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And his teams just, they just couldn't push through. Didn't have enough depth.
Nope.
No.
It's a shame. He's probably the best player to never won a cup.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, tell you, he's really fantastic. But Russ, it was so great that you could do this today. Where can people find you on Twitter and many of your platforms and podcasts?
At Sportsology, or go to sportsology.com. Instagram, at Sportsology. Usually I'm posting all in those places. People could find me. And I'm glad you guys are at full strength again. That's good.
So, Russ, thanks again. And stay safe, man.
Thanks, you too. Take care.
Right. Take care. Well, gents, he caught me flat-footed with full strength thing. I didn't know what he was talking about.
We're always full strength, baby.
Yeah.
Not a full deck, but full strength.
No, full deck, no. This is crazy. These are crazy times, man. We're going to look back and Jesus, how did we get through this? So, Dan, you are a busy man. You just had a great article. And why don't you tell the people about it, and then with that, your contact info and some of the shows that you have coming up.
The most recent issue of Top 5 was Unbreakable Flyers Records. There's some wacky stuff in there if you want to check that out. But 4 articles a week, every week on Brotherly Puck, at Brotherly_pod. I'll be back tomorrow night with a brand new BPW radio and an Angry Negative show. So be sure to check that out at Angry Negative as well. And at Dan the Flyer Fan.
Fantastic. Chef?
You can catch me at Chef the Left B on Twitter and at Steam Pub in Southampton on Instagram, Chef at Steam Pub, Chef the Left B at Steam Pub, and what else? We started back with all of our daily specials. You can get our wing special on Monday nights to go, burger special on Tuesday nights to go. Wednesday night it's cheesesteaks, and Thursday nights it's prime ribs. And of course, we're doing all the social distancing stuff that you need, and we're doing non-contact pickups. You pay for everything online over the phone or whatever you got to do, and you come and it's ready waiting for you when you get there, man. So it's great. And thanks everybody that supported us. We're killing it. Got to hire 2 more people back. It was awesome.
Fantastic. I got to call Martin. We got to get an ad together here. But that's it's Steam Pub in Southampton, PA. Check them out at Steam Pub. And with that, you can follow us at the O&B Puckcast, at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. If you could rate and subscribe, it moves us up the charts. It never costs a dime to listen to our podcast in one of our 7 platforms, including SoundCloud, at least for a couple more times maybe. And with that, everybody, enjoy yourselves out there in the nice weather. Stay safe and take care.